Hi, my name is Catherine Berlinger, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about in-class practice, opportunities we can provide for students. If there's one thing I really believe about teaching, it's that the students in the class should be working at least as hard as I do. And because I believe that, I really have to be careful not to let myself get overwhelmed at the amount of material that I feel I need to get through. Because the happiest teaching I have, the most satisfying, and I think the most successful, is when none of us are in a rush, that the whole class is actually working through material at a pace that's manageable. So if you're spending most of your class lecturing and uncovering material in a desperate attempt to get through the course, it's likely that the course outline needs looking at and that your teaching rhythm probably needs some adjusting so you can enjoy your teaching more. We need to ensure that the students work with the material for a significant amount of time, manipulating aspects of the concepts or practicing the skill every single class. And so that's what this is about, providing in-class practice. So just to review first what it means to be teaching with integrity, it means that we have alignment between the four following aspects. The course outcomes that the college has asked us to teach to the students, the teaching methods that we use during the classroom sessions, whether that's online or in person, the in-class practice that we provide to students so that they know when they're moving towards being capable of meeting the outcomes that we have, and then the evaluation pieces with which we determine whether or not the student has met those outcomes. If any one of those four things doesn't match up, then there's definitely a problem that needs to be looked at in terms of the course, the teaching methods, the way practice is given to the students, or the evaluation. So I usually go through steps in my mind when I'm thinking about making my course work or having integrity for it. And the first step is looking at the outcome. So I'll examine an outcome and ask what a student would need in terms of knowledge, skills, and professional attitude in order to meet it. And then I determine how I'll know if they've met the outcome, through what assessment mechanism. So I'm looking at my course outline and I'm trying to determine what it is the outcomes are and how I would know whether or not a student had met one of them. Step two, I've got to plan my method or methods of delivering input that would help a group of very diverse learners move towards this outcome. And we talk a bit about that in lesson planning in tip 1 and effective teaching presentations in tip 2. And here comes the focus for today. I've got to include in-class opportunities for practice and feedback that are greater in challenge than my planned marked assessment for the outcome. And let me just say why it's so important that the practice in class be reflective of how the students are going to be evaluated for marks. I can give you an example. A teacher recently told me that she had students in classroom episodes dividing the overall task up into 4 parts, and each one of them became an expert at a particular part in a sort of a jigsaw method. And then they exchanged information in the class, and the students had real ownership, really strong ownership of one aspect, but they were introduced to all of the other aspects as well in a very interactive learning opportunity. But the final evaluation required the student to actually demonstrate all of the steps of a particular process when they had only really felt that they had gotten ownership of one, and the student complained and objected to the assessment and asked for a redo of it. So you can see that students are evaluating, does the in-class practice prepare me for how I'm actually going to be evaluated, and does it do so adequately? So students are examining that matchup. So it's important that the practice be in some ways, at some point anyway, not always, but at some point similar to how they're going to be evaluated, and at least as hard as that evaluation. And step 4, I need to assess the class or the individual students in the class against the outcome. I need to make note of any challenges, and then next time I can adjust steps 2 and 3 so that things will work even better. If you find that the outcome itself is a concern, it's certainly really important to consult with the program team, with your fellow faculty and the program coordinator, with your chair, talk about making changes to that course, and you can also consult Conestoga's curriculum consultants, and they can help you to look at the outcomes and perhaps ways of rewording them or reworking the course. As you start to work on the in-class practice sessions even more and seeing if they match with the other 3 aspects, you'll find that students, if they see a strong relationship between the desired outcome, the teaching methods, the in-class practice, and the evaluation, they'll have buy-in in terms of participating in the practice sessions and being involved. When they don't see buy-in, I think you find students will run off for coffee or start to disengage or get distracted by technology, etc. But when they see it's really going to tie into evaluation, I haven't found I had any problems with that at all. You need to make sure, as I mentioned, that any practice is of a similar type and at least as hard as the test questions and testing environment. That's not to say that there can't be other things that don't match as tightly, but before you let go of that particular outcome, there should be some kind of a match-up so students know what to anticipate and are ready for it. I do find that students disengage if the way they practice in class is not the same way in which they are evaluated. And for example, I once took a course, a master's course, where we spent the in-class sessions debating educational practice in small groups and reporting back. And then the final exam was a 40% multiple choice test that was mostly about terminology and theorists. You can bet that we did not feel that that had integrity. So in addition to practicing the type of questions students might be required to answer on your next assessment, both during the practice and in the pre-assessment and post-assessment phases of your lesson, you may want to try a few of the examples that I have below. I found by going through examples regularly when I'm preparing for the semester, I can find different ways of doing the assessment, which leads to different in-class practice, or I come up with a practice idea and I say, hey, that would also make a good final assessment. So depending on how I'm going to evaluate the students in the end, I'll have them practice in class in a variety of ways. For example, if they're going to have to demonstrate a skill, in addition to having them do that skill in class at some point and getting feedback before the actual formal evaluation, I sometimes have pairs list the steps involved and potential hazards for each step, ask groups to predict various outcomes given switches in the process, have pairs estimate or calculate results given certain variables, sometimes have the class subdivide the process and each group demonstrate the step correctly and incorrectly. For calculations, I have the students work through problem sets and post the work for others to see in a walk around, so there's just papers up around the room or online, and then have students list the various professionals who impact on the process directly and indirectly in the field so that they see a broader view of it. If the assessment would be essay questions, reports, or presentations, then I want the students working on things that will better prepare them to answer that type of questions, and you can see that list there. And then finally, if they're going to be multiple choice, etc., I will do votes by hand in class, terminology lists, new input, and ask students to list details related to certain concepts. So I hope this has been helpful in thinking about the in-class process practice piece and processes related to that so that you can have a tighter tie-in between the four aspects of teaching.